Hey, good afternoon. Let's go ahead and get started. I hope that you had a good long weekend with MLK Day. It's good to have you all back. We're moving right along with the quarter, even though we got a little bit of a late start. We're still working through some key ideas and moving forward in the class. For this week, we'll be talking about listening and what it means to listen and participate within small groups. So we'll be doing an activity today. It's another opportunity to work in small groups to think about what it means to be a good and effective listener, right? Listening can be a challenge on its own. I know a few of you are taking the COM 330 or listening class that gets into that in more detail, but listening is an important skill to continue to work on and to develop over time. So we'll be getting into this for today and Friday. I also want to note that I know that this has been a challenging time with the Omicron variant, and just that it's been a weird and kind of rough start to the year. So if you feel like you're falling behind in the class or you find yourself in need of extra support, you're welcome to reach out to me. I'm happy to develop a plan to help you feel like you're struggling and falling behind on some of the assignments and other things in the class. And as a few folks have done, you're welcome to join through Zoom if you're not able to come to class physically. And then I also, again, will post the recordings after class. And then I also post these slides before class so that you can follow along without needing to write everything down. So what I'd like you to do is to start us out for today. I want you to take a few minutes on your own. And I'd like you to either write or type. You don't turn this in yet, but it will be part of your attendance. Your response to the following question, specifically how social media has impacted your relationships. For instance, has social media, in your opinion, brought you closer together to other people or further apart? And this is opinion-based. There's no right or wrong answer to this question, but it's based on your own experience with social media. So I want you to take some time to write or type your perspective on this topic. And we'll be returning to this a little bit later. Those of you on Zoom, you're welcome to type this up, and then you'll turn in your attendance at the end of class. take a couple more minutes on this. Go ahead and finish up different thought or idea, right? All right, so again, I'm going to ask you to hang on to this for a little bit later. We'll be doing an activity that connects to this prompt a bit later in the class. But this is a way to start thinking about small group communication and listening. So last class, last week, we talked about elements of culture, small group communication. We also got into media, and then we did the survival activity. For those of you that were able to join us last class, the survival activity involved being trapped in the middle of the wilderness, having a set of different items, for instance, whiskey, an air map, a few other things, and then you as a group working together to rank those items in importance. It was a way for us to practice group membership and understand the different roles that we have in a group and bringing ideas to the table, as well as the ways that different cultures and values could be reflected in our group participation. As a reminder, 1 week from today, so next Wednesday, by midnight, I am asking you to turn in your group membership reflection. That's your first writing assignment, but it's pretty short. It's only 2 pages or so long. And the prompt again is available on Canvas. You can outline and send me drafts, including a rough draft or an outline for feedback, or if you have questions related to the assignment. I recommend, again, using a style guide to help you with citing sources, reaching out to me if you need additional support. Remember that this assignment asks you to look at a group that you're a current or former member of and reflect on your own participation and engagement within that group. I also have this week's quiz available too. It goes over the reading for this week. And remember that those are just due on Sundays. Last class, we talked about the importance of context and culture, right? Context runs a spectrum from low to high context. So in a low context culture like the United States, right, a lot of members will say what they mean, and there's not a lot of subtext or subtlety in communication, right? So if you say no, you don't want something that it's usually being correct. Whereas in a more high context culture, such as Japan or China, right, there's a lot more subtext, there's group norms that impact communication. So you're less likely to say no if you don't want something because it's considered rude. You're more likely to say maybe or I'm not sure because that's considered more respectful. So the importance of culture is a big factor in how we choose to communicate because, again, when we participate in groups, we oftentimes have people who come from really different cultural backgrounds and perspectives. So it's valuable for us to understand the ways that they shape how members of the group communicate. We also talked last class about this idea of media richness theory, right, where media runs on a spectrum. A group chain email with like 40 people that it's sent to, right, is very lean. It doesn't have much richness to it. It's just text. You're just reading it off, right? On the other extreme, a face-to-face encounter has nonverbal communication, has physical 3D space, it has this level of engagement one-on-one with one another. And so oftentimes we find ourselves able to better listen and understand and participate in richer forms of media. Remember that nonverbal cues are a huge part of how we communicate. In fact, they can make up to 85% of our overall communication. And so our use of a lot of these different channels to communicate can oftentimes limit the degree that we understand each other nonverbal. If a boss sends you a message that says, we need to have a meeting, right? You don't know what that means, absent of cues and signals, and maybe it's just for something entirely casual. So this class will build on some of these ideas to talk about listening and what listening means in small groups. We'll talk about what it means to be an effective and a good listener. And then lastly, we'll be talking about how listening in our second group activity builds off of the prompt that we did for today. So I just want to start by sort of raising an overarching question about listening and sort of what listening is and what it means. Anybody want to take a stab at it and define listening in their own way?
Like giving the person your fully undivided attention.
Yeah, so giving attention is definitely a part of listening. What other things would somebody do in the listening process? Yeah, right. So nonverbal cues and feedback are another component of listening, right? Part of what's happening now is an example of what we'll be talking about in just a minute with like a bystander effect, right? So a lot of people in the group, oftentimes we don't want to speak because we're hoping that somebody else will, right? The smaller the group is, right, the more likely each member is to participate actively and fully. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Yes, listening gets at the idea that you're attending and understanding the message. You are, really trying to recall and remember. You're giving feedback. So there's a couple more parts to listening as a process, right? Listening, right, is basically 5 different steps. So there's the physical act of hearing, right? And not all listening is necessarily audio. Listening can be through visuals, right? Through your use of facial expressions, gestures, and other things that you pick up on with your eyes. It can also be the use of things such as touch, right? Tapping somebody on the shoulder. Listening likely does not involve smell or taste, but 3 of the 5 senses, sound, touch, and hearing, or hearing, touch, and vision, are major components of the listening process, right? So listening is more than just hearing. It also means you understand the message, right? You can decipher what it means. It also means that you can recall the message, right? You can remember the message for later. It means that you're able to evaluate the message, to think critically about the message and what it means, if it's true or if it's false, right? Oftentimes, when something like public address or speech is given, there'll be fact checkers who evaluate the message and use that as part of the listening process to see if what was said was correct or false. And then the idea, as kind of mentioned, of giving feedback, right? Of paying attention to the message and verbally or non-verbally responding to it. Nodding your head or saying yes in response to a message could be an example of incorporating feedback. Pictured here, right? We would not interpret this as listening, right? Because you have somebody who's talking and then the other person is down on their phones. Even though the guy over here is able to physically pick up on and hear the message, right? The reason we know that he's not listening is because that's not where his eyes are, that's not where his focus is, right? He's down on his phone. And so even though he's physically hearing, he's not listening to or understanding the message. He might interject with, yeah, at random times while the other person is speaking. That would be pseudo listening, right? Or using nonverbal communication to trick somebody into thinking that you're listening when you're not actually, right? Big part of why is because person on the right is using a lot of gestures. She's clearly, right, indicating a lot of ways she's communicating with her body. And that's not being picked up on because you're not looking at and fully paying attention to the message. So listening, again, is more than just picking up with your ears. It's about really understanding and making sense of the message in its entirety. So with that in mind, right, There's also a question of what it means to be an active or engaged listener. How many folks have heard the term active listener before? Yeah, so it's something that you probably have heard maybe in other classes or maybe like in applied settings like at work, right? If somebody says you need to be an active listener. So an active listener is a skill that's really important when you're working in a group. So an active listener means that you are really focusing on and attending to that message, that that message matters to you and that you're present as part of the group, right? If you're falling asleep when you're a member of a group, then you're not engaged in the active listening process. You also show you're listening non-verbally. There's a lot of different ways to do that. Eye contact is one big way to do so. Taking notes can sometimes be useful, but you also want to be careful about when it is and isn't appropriate to take notes, right? If you're casually talking to a friend, you're not going to take notes because they'll interpret it as something else that you're like doing your homework. You also want to avoid interrupting, right? So one thing that's really common is that we think faster than somebody else speaks, right? If you think about it, somebody is saying words to you, and as you're hearing those words, you're going a mile a minute. You're thinking about what you had for lunch, what you're going to do when you get back home, what's going on in the dorms, right? There's all sorts of things going on in your head that are running faster than the message. And because we think faster than somebody speaks, it can be challenging for us to return to the message and its focus. That also means that we're more likely to interrupt other people because we want to speed up and expedite the process, right? Somebody's talking and we finish their sentence. I was so tired today because you didn't get enough sleep, right? That can be frustrating to the other person because oftentimes when they're interrupted mid-sentence, the rest of the sentence was not interpreted correctly, right? No, I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say I was working on homework. An active listener, right, is choosing the message over your own internal dialogue. Again, because we think faster than other people speak, it's focusing on what that person has to say and trying to get ourselves back into it over what's going on in our thoughts, right? We also, if we want to be good active listeners, will paraphrase. This can be a really useful strategy if you're in a conflict or an argument with somebody. You feel like the sides aren't being understood. One thing you can do if you find yourself disagreeing with somebody is to ask them to paraphrase or say back to you your point. That's a great way to test if they're listening. And it also helps to ensure that if there's a communication gap in what you're trying to say and what they're interpreting, that gets picked up on. Clarifying questions can also help, right? They show that you're interested and that you're engaged. Wait, what did you say your afternoon class was again? It can be a helpful way to show other people that you care. So when it comes to dealing with group listening in particular, right, there's a lot of different strategies we can think about. Listening in a group is really different than listening one-on-one. If it's one-on-one, it's you and the other person, you're hearing their message, you're responding back to your message, it's pretty straightforward. If you think back to the beginning of the quarter, we talked about how the more people there are in a group, the more possible combinations that there are. And so there are so many different ways that people can be communicating in a group, and often you're in a role of trying to listen to a message, but there's a lot of things that are good to do as part of that practice. One idea is special time dedicated to listening to messages. For instance, if you're a boss or you're a mediator or you're a captain, right, you might dedicate the beginning of your meeting to hearing out the perspectives of people and letting them share their concerns. Or designating a particular amount of time to each person so that you can go around the room and have everybody share their ideas. Again, avoiding interruption is really important because it shows that you're really attending to and following them. When we're a member of a group, sometimes it can feel harder to get a word in edgewise and feel like we can participate and be involved, especially when we have something we really want to say. And so oftentimes we're more compelled to interrupt in a group because we feel like that's our only opportunity to say anything at all. Another challenge is avoiding judgment, right? We do oftentimes what's called defensive listening, where if we find ourselves hearing a perspective, like a political or social view that we disagree with, we oftentimes immediately shut it down, right? And judge that message in order to protect our own views. So avoiding that kind of judgment, really hearing out what the person says is really important. Acceptance is another key idea, right? You have to validate and accept that people belong in the conversation and in the discussion through communication. You have to show that you understand the message. Again, you can show that through nonverbal cues. So there's a useful strategy called the Jefferson rule that can be used in a lot of situations. That is, if you hear a message, like if somebody's talking to you, or you read an email or comment online or something like that, right? And you think to yourself, yikes, I don't like this message at all. I'm really upset, right? Somebody has said something that really bothers you. Count to 10 in your head and then say your response, right? Because if you are reacting in what you say, you're more likely to say something you regret, you're more likely to be insulting and hurtful. Counting to 10 in your head gives you a chance to cool off and to say, you know what, I shouldn't respond or interject. Or maybe there's a more constructive way to respond to the message. So that can be useful, especially in a group. And also to remember that the respect and relationships among group members is not something that happens right away, but something that happens over time as people disclose and feel more comfortable with one another. Again, getting back to the idea of self-disclosure and sharing personal details over time. So earlier in class, right, I asked you to define what was listening. And right, I held silence until somebody had the chance to share. And this is an example, right, of the kind of bystander effect. The more people there are in a group, the more likely it is that you're not going to act and that you're going to wait for somebody else to do it. As an example, if you see somebody that's hurting someone else, right, that's attacking them, and you're like the only person there, or there's only like one or two people there, there's a really good chance you're going to call 911 or you're going to try to break up the fight, right? Or at least to do something to address the issue if it really is bothering you. Because you see yourself as the person that is assigned and whatever by circumstance needs to do it. However, the more people that get added into a group, the less likely you are to be the one to do it, right? If in your team, there's somebody that has to be the one to clean up the lockers, right? You don't want to do it. Maybe you play nose goes, figure out who has to do it, right? You are more likely not to volunteer, hoping that somebody else will volunteer and speak. So that's a problem in how we listen and communicate in small groups, right? Because it means we're less likely to engage because we see other people as filling in the gaps for us, right? That's the idea of social loafing. The more people there are, the less likely it is for us to participate and be involved because we think somebody else will pick up the slack for us, especially in a larger group where on average, we would be communicating a little bit less. Another idea here, right, that makes listening in groups challenging is that it's easier to get tired, right? A big reason why is because there's a lot of people talking and you have to pick up on the verbal and nonverbal cues from everybody. You're not only hearing somebody else talk, you're seeing other people's reactions. You're jumping between people who might communicate and speak in very different ways and so on, right? I mentioned before, a lot of the reason we feel really fatigued through Zoom is because in these small little rectangles, we're having to pick up on nonverbal communication from everybody, and we don't have the same size or three-dimensional space to hear other people or understand the message. We also might not know the topics as well, right? Oftentimes we feel like we're not able to listen in groups well because maybe they've shifted to talking about a band or a place that other people have traveled that you've never heard of, right? You're not always talking with somebody else in a group about things you know much about, especially if groups kind of subdivide into smaller sections. It can be difficult, again, if things like the topic, issue, and so on change, right? You're not always at the same page or level that that person is at in the process. There's less opportunity to influence others, right? Again, because you have, on average, less of a ratio of time that you're speaking relative to other people, you're going to feel like you can't control the flow or direction of the conversation as much. Maybe you really want to talk about a particular topic or bring up an issue, but the conversation has moved elsewhere. Listening can also prevent you from getting your ideas out, right? That because you spend a lot of time listening and paying attention to other people, and maybe your brain is on overdrive trying to listen, that you can't get as much out there. You're also maybe more likely to daydream or lose focus because, again, you have less opportunity to speak overall, and it's harder to focus when you're listening. And then lastly, as I mentioned before, this idea of social loafing or bystander effect, where the more people there are in a group, the less likely you are to participate, is another challenge that can come. At the same time, though, right, despite these challenges, there's a lot of things that work really well when groups are able to listen. And this can be useful as you're thinking about jobs that you are or might be doing in the future, the teams and groups that you're a part of, so on, right? One idea is that you can have more time to understand and make sense of this. Because you have the opportunity to listen to more people and hear ideas, maybe A talks, then B talks, and C talks, right? You're able to listen to everybody and then jump in with your idea, rather than just listening to one person. You have more time to develop a perspective. There again are overall more ideas and perspectives shared. You increase the group, you increase the diversity of opinions, thoughts, and ideas that group members have, and that can be a really good thing to tackling an issue in unique ways. And it helps to create out-of-the-box solutions, particularly synergy in the way ideas can grow. So for instance, maybe one person brings in a new company logo and somebody else says, that's great, let's add a green stripe. Oh yeah, let's add a yellow stripe under it, right? You start to develop that idea further in a way that goes beyond what you would come up with on your own. As an example, right, there's a lot of ways that small groups can facilitate good and effective listening. One example of doing so effectively is the use of things such as common spaces, right? So for instance, a lot of businesses or companies will create lounges or other spaces that are dedicated for people to talk or for people to listen to one another. Companies such as Apple and Valve use a lot of this style of common space. There's also, for instance, people that will do things such as listen-ins, where again, a supervisor or leader, right, dedicates the beginning of a discussion to group members listening, sharing their concerns, grievances, and so on. Another style of listening that we see in more political contexts is like the town hall, right? A town hall is a style of forum where members of the public can raise their questions or concerns to an elected leader and allow them to listen. But in a lot of settings like this one, the creation of physical space and a positive listening environment, right, where people feel like they can comfortably share their thoughts, is an important way that small groups can develop a lot of good listening skills. So what I want to do now is I'm going to split us in half into two larger groups. And using the prompt that you all worked at the beginning of class today, I'm going to give you all some time so that each group member can share their perspective on the prompt for today. How has social media impacted your relationships, brought you closer together and further apart? And what I want you all to do is to really focus on listening actively and to focus on understanding people as they're sharing and putting together their perspectives. So as people are sharing, right, take notes on the points that are raised by other people within your group. And be prepared to share and know the perspectives that each person in your group has. So that way it's an opportunity for you to test and use those listening skills for each person that's in the group as a whole. So we have, so let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So one group of 7, one group of 8, and then we'll have folks on Zoom join in a group of 2. So again, for round, share your ideas, and as you're doing that, and take notes on and really follow along what people have to say in their prompts.
Go.
All right, so social media.
The person in social media has brought my relationship closer because it gives me an opportunity to touch with my training for a while. The opportunity to see as much. However, it does have its complications, such as like long distance relationships are usually harder to come up, like physical interaction that usually Overall, while it has some complications, social media helps to reach out to the people, see, communicate with.
I put
And not
down,
maybe the nonverbal aspects.
I think social media impacted me in a good way, mostly just staying in touch with family and friends back home. I just think it's a good thing. It's impacted me in a good way, be able to meet more people through it.
Like I said, same thing. It's kept me close with a lot of people that I know, and then also it's nice to meet new people and just like even if I don't know them super well, it's like if I see them and I can like start a conversation with them, I know them. Yeah, just meeting new people and keeping my relationships with other.
I guess for myself, I don't
I
use
think
it
it impacts
for
my
my
relationship
mainstream. I
with, like,
usually use
my
Discord,
love,
which
my love
I'm able to
language.
create groups for fire groups. and
My love
it's a
language is
huge
like
way I like to
quality time.
interact with
physical
people.
touch,
So
every time.
we have share the same interests because that's what the group is.
So I see
That's
how like
my-
it affects. Also, the
Yeah,
so
I'm not seeing you guys very like,
when I put
something
my
that
values into my message, I think that's my-
actually shifts, but
so
also
I
like
think it helps my relationship with my
Especially at
residents, because
college,
that's really
they, like,
like,
T tags, see people and see new faces, like
and
you
like knocking on my door.
interact with them secondhand, you actually see the person, so it's a good thing to do, especially with Canada versus at college.
Yeah, much like I use Facebook a lot.
Mhm.
It's a source of social media. That's really nice to like stay in contact with friends and stuff. It definitely has helped like my relationship. Some of my friends after like going out to college, like, stay close and move closer as friendships because we're able to talk a lot more and stuff. And like one thing I also noted that I think in general, social media brings everyone closer together, but that can be both good and bad. Because people can both like bully and stuff on social media. Because they're able to be in contact with a lot of people. So I think that like in general, it brings people closer together, but it's not always.
I said that.
Social media has been being way more, and since I live like far away, I'm still able to have in person because I'm more present, I guess. And so,
I said social media is good and allows me to stay close to my friends and all that. My only problem is just being consistent. It's hard to be kind of in that it's like,
I'm just doing like no shit. Learning to that's just-
What do they call it?
I'm like, right, right. I can look at that. So I was saying how
I got a text from Judy this morning, it was way too canceled. I wouldn't even know.
You guys still work.
I know, but I didn't think the girls should be there.
We just walked in, me and Evan go to each other.
People don't reach out to you because you like people. They're like, they
Yeah.
think they
None of you guys are in.
Yeah.
That's bad.
Yeah.
We're just quitting.
Like I know. Too much about his life.
They like, it's understandable, like, why you reach out to them. Like, they didn't check if they're doing podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like, you know?
That's forever.
I don't know if that means. I don't know if that means.
So my name is James. I'm like far away from home, so
You never know.
my thing that from
Could be, but
I say it depends, like
Normally you
she's
do
my
it.
second mother, so I learn most of
Really fun.
hard finding, like no. It's really impossible. Let's say with the next thing is you get messages from
It's like, virtual is best.
Mhm.
Like, strengthens.
Mine, well, we don't really use use it for social media that much. I'm just not just talking with my friends that feel like because they're college.
So if your group has wrapped up and you've heard from everybody, if your group is wrapping up, I want you to return to the activity that you did at the beginning of class today to summarize the perspectives shared by each member of your group on this topic. So maybe using the notes that you took or just what you remember about what they shared and brought to the table. And then after that, to think about what you noticed about your own listening, as well as what went well and what you might try to improve upon as you continue to listen. So if your group is wrapped up, I'll give you a bit of time to work on that. Then I'll ask some folks to share.
And summarizing.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, but you don't have to go.
Take a couple minutes to finish up. Go ahead and finish up the current thought or idea that you're working on. So what I'm going to do is ask one person from each of the groups to share their response to one of these three questions. So let's start with this first question about summarizing perspectives of group members. So let's hear from the group over here on this side. Is there somebody that would like to share what the perspectives were that stood out to them? What did they notice as they were listening to people's opinions on this topic? Yeah.
So we summarized, we all had pretty similar views that social media is a great way to make new connections as well as maintain old ones from hometowns and whatnot. But also brought up that social media also brings a lot of hate and bullying and whatnot, and that also affects negatively some relationships with social media.
Sure.
That was kind of like the common thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the idea that you brought to the table that there was something that emerged as this common shared set of experiences. It's kind of like a Venn diagram, right? As you're listening in a group, you're noticing things that are really emerging over time as the shared experience, but you also kind of listed out some very kind of individual experiences that were probably shared as the group went around, right? And we're able to add those to the table. So one advantage, and again, I noticed that, there was a lot of folks who were going around like in a circle to share their thoughts and to bring those into the table, right? One really big advantage of that is just that you can have individual ideas being shared, but you can also have the group as a whole start to understand and develop commonalities. One challenge, right, and something Ryan knows from conflict management, right, is the challenge of groupthink, right? Because if you're going around and sharing ideas and perspectives, there's a chance if you're later and it gets to you that maybe you have an idea that's a little bit different and you don't want to share that, or you share an idea that conforms a little bit more to the interests of the group. For instance, if you're going to go see a movie with friends, right, you watch the latest Spider-Man and everybody loved it and started talking about how much they loved it, and you didn't really like it. It wasn't really your thing, right? Hearing people before you say that they enjoyed it might make you self-censor and say, oh yeah, it was good, and not share your real opinion or bring that to the table because you didn't want to disrupt the group, you wanted to fit in, and so on, right? So one challenge in working with a group is figuring out how to avoid that group thing. Even if you go around a circle and share your perspectives, people might start to censor or share a slightly different version to conform a little bit to what they see the group as doing. So let's hear from somebody over here on this side about what went well or what they noticed about their own listening as they were hearing people in the group share.
Yeah, we went in a circle and it seemed to go pretty well. And we talked about, like, after each person shared, we kind of like talked about it. So it wasn't just listening, writing it down, and moving on. So I feel like it went well and more practice will improve it.
Yeah. Yeah, so like taking the time to really attend to and focus on a message after it's received in a group can be really useful, right? So having somebody share their thought or idea on social media, having other people jump in and add to that conversation or to share their own thoughts regarding that person's comment is a really great way of somebody feeling like, again, they're being comprehended and that they're being responded to, right? So that's a good practice to do. One potential drawback or concern about that approach, one thing we'll talk about a little bit more next class, is that if we focus too much on what our response is to a message rather than the message itself, right, we do sometimes risk shifting it back to being about ourselves rather than just being about the person listening. It doesn't sound like that happened in this group, right? But one thing that's a difficult tightrope is listening to respond, to comprehend, to clarify without like getting off of the original person who spoke and that we're listening to. It's a difficult balance to try to maintain. It's listening enough, but not shifting away from the original idea that was brought up. And lastly, I'd love to hear from somebody in the Zoom group about how they feel like they might be able to improve their listening when they're participating in small groups.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can.
Okay. So I think one way to improve listening in small groups is just to take time to hear your group members' perspective and then provide some feedback so it will show that you listened and understood. And also just be open-minded.
Yeah, those are all really good pieces of advice, right? Being open-minded, right? Being open to the idea that your opinion and your view can change is really important because, again, oftentimes in a lot of cultures, like in the United States, it's seen that changing your opinion or perspective is a sign of weakness, but it can actually be a sign of growth, right? Of paying attention. Taking the time to understand and make sense of the message is important too, because oftentimes, right, we like to fill in silence. We like to fill in space with something. That's why it feels really awkward if we go with a silence before somebody starts talking. But silence can also be good. It can be a way for people to think and to start to develop their response to an idea or to really develop it. So silence is not always bad. One challenge too, right, is listening and hearing from one another on something like Zoom. Obviously misses a lot of the nonverbal cues, right? If the camera's off, you're not able to pick up on facial expressions and gestures. And it can make it harder to stay focused and to stay on task. But at the same time, right, having the focus just audio does help in terms of understanding just the core of the message and its meaning. So it can definitely be a thing to continue to work on and develop in creating good skills for these kind of digital forms of listening. So thank you all for sharing. To wrap up some of the major ideas that we went over for today, we were talking about the role of listening in small groups. Again, listening is challenging. It's a skill that we continue to try to develop over time. But listening, despite its challenges in groups, can be really helpful too in understanding and working with one another. And some of those challenges can include things such as not having as much time to focus or as much time to speak, right? Responsive listening, where you're listening to prepare what to say next, can also be a barrier. But again, listening can be a really useful skill in groups that help us to understand the needs of the people we're working with. And then today's activity in hearing people's perspectives on social media, right, was a way to build listening skills, build commonality, and to also try to understand and use active listening as an approach. So for next class on Friday, we're going to continue to look at small group listening and some additional practices and things that we can do to improve our own listening as we're participating and being members of small groups. So go ahead and either email me or pass forward your attendance activity for today. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and I will see you again for Friday's class.